Welcome to the 10 Revolutions podcast, where we have conversations with people who are shaping the future of work, education, and society as a whole. In this episode, we meet Neil Harrison, founder of the Adoptologists, who is an AI adoption and change consultant, and Sam Osys, a digital design ethicist. We debate the importance of human-centred design and adoption, the conflict between profitability and societal needs, and what the proliferation of these technologies mean for business and humanity as a whole, with some candid advice for young people growing up in a world of unprecedented change. Let's get into it.
So today I have Neil Harrison and Sam Osys with me. We're talking about AI. Pretty revolutionary topic. We've actually touched on it a couple of times already on previous podcasts, but this is a podcast dedicated to the subject of AI, particularly around adoption and the ethics around it. So I'll hand over to my guests to just introduce themselves briefly.
Hi, Mark. Well, thanks very much for the invite. I'm delighted to be here, of course, and talking about AI. So that's brilliant. So I'm Neil Harrison. I'm the founder at the Adoptologists.
Yep. Hi, I'm Sam. Thank you yet again for inviting me here as well. I am a designer. I work currently for one of the biggest UK banks where I'm trying to embed human-centered design. I'm also doing a PhD in design ethics in the engineering and innovation faculty at the Open University. So hence why I'm here.
So it's going to be a topic grounded in adoption, the adoption challenges within businesses locally, and I guess the whole ethical discussion. So tell me a little bit more about your business, Neil.
So for the last 2 years, I've focused on helping leaders of change, let's say, leadership in organisations to adopt AI with a focus on people, behaviours, culture, ethical adoption, responsible usage. So whilst I'm not focused on the technologies or implementing technologies, what does the organisational response to AI need to be given, where we are with it?
Okay. And as a design ethicist, what does that encompass then, Sam?
Well, so my area is not specifically AI. It's more about technology and how it can have both very good consequences for society and very bad ones. So my PhD, the kind of the thing that I'm focusing on is design ethics and how the technologies that we design and implement, and specifically digital technology is what I'm looking at, what kind of negative consequences can they have, and where ethics is located within design practice. So I'm looking at designers in, let's say, their natural habitats within organizations, big and small, and I'm trying to understand how they deal with ethical tensions. How do systemic barriers within organizations, so the leaders within the organizations, how it can negatively impact whatever we designers want to do. So I tend to think that we all want to do what's good for society and we all want to do it for the common good, but very often systemic barriers and that kind of profit focus impedes that. So my focus is human-centered design, maybe even more than human-centered design, which might be a topic as well for one of these, and how we can just make good for society and communities.
Okay. And before we get sort of deeply into it, we normally kick this podcast off by just talking about how we know each other. So I know you, Neil, obviously.
Yes.
Sam, we haven't met before, but we share a partner, a romantic partner. Your romantic partner is my business partner. So, yeah.
Goodness. I did not know this.
Yeah. So this is how we know each other.
Yeah.
And a wonderful woman she is, Marina. So
Indeed.
obviously very lucky to have her working alongside me. And Sam, how do you and Neil know each other?
So I'll go, because I think it's a nice link to what Sam was describing about our relationship more recently. But actually, we've worked together in consulting, a boutique consulting company. We worked together there. Sam opened my eyes to design, thinking like a designer, and how that relates to my work. And actually, ever since, I've just been picking her brains and listening, to her talking, having conversations on a regular basis for years.
It was funny. There was this presentation. We didn't know each other before. We were working in the same company. It was a very small company.
Yeah.
Like the fact that we didn't know each other before that meeting, but it was all online because this is post-COVID. So obviously we were all working kind of from our laptops and stuff. And Neil and I were in a meeting where I was supposed to like present a process that I would follow to do a certain project. And then I think someone asked you and said, "Okay, Neil, so what would you?" And he's like, "Well, what Sam said, right? This is what we should be doing." And then Neil and I just hit it off straight away. We've been basically in constant conversation since then. And at some point, everything I know about change is actually from Neil. So we've both kind of taught one another our subject areas and made what we do even more stronger. And I even found at some point this kind of piece of academic literature that was something around like how does human-centered design support change, and how is change the future of human-centered design, and how actually the two are absolutely like it's non-negotiable that every organization should be embedding both.
Okay. And tell me a little bit more about your PhD research that you're doing.
What would you like to know? I'm on year 4. Year 4. Super excited about it. I've actually just published a paper, my first paper, conference paper, around situated ethics and how we need to think about the context of everything we do. A lot of organizations like to think that if they implement 10 principles of AI ethics, everyone's going to follow them and everything's going to be fine. And it's more of a tick boxing exercise, really, than really doing ethical design. My PhD is all about the context that you find yourself in, the local context. So, what does the organization do? Who are the people? Who are the audience? Who are the customers? We need to understand all of that for ethics to really be embedded in the design process. And so, that's kind of my PhD.
Okay. And I don't know, this might be an oversimplification, but I guess trying to build ethics is almost a little bit like putting guardrails and trying to maybe slow down the adoption of the technology, or at least have governance in place before the company. Could you say, you were talking earlier about the drive for profits and growth, and clearly, if we look at this globally and holistically, there is the drive to be number one. The natural human tendency to compete is driving rapid adoption, but maybe at the expense of strong ethics and guardrails. So.
All of the above. I'd say all of the above. And I'd say, again, context is key here. Different organizations will have different guardrails, different maturity when it comes to their rules and regulations and policies. So, for instance, a bank where I work in, so that's the context that I find myself in, loads of rules and regulations, loads, British and overseas, everything kind of impacting it. But if you look at it from the bottom up, you can see this hodgepodge, I like to call it, of kind of different policies and frameworks. But actually there's loads of gaping holes, and technology is moving so fast, it's really hard to foresee what those guardrails are. So I think it's a combination of the rules, the regulations, the guardrails, as you rightly put it, but also talking about, reflecting about what you're doing in the context you find yourself in, and just having those conversations. I once did a talk about a network of ethicists within organizations and the importance of having that. And it's not about hiring ethicists. It's about just having those people within the organizations that can kind of spread that love a little bit.
Okay.
I think there's an interesting point, the way you phrase the question and so on, is that I don't think this kind of work is anywhere near as black and white as people talk about it generally.
Yeah.
And so there is a rush for productivity and automation and reducing cost and all that kind of thing. But actually, through ethical approaches and responsible AI usage, that doesn't impede profitability or pace or anything else. And in fact, in many instances, if you get that right and just take a bit of time up front, you can improve that. And if people understand what they can and cannot do within responsible guardrails, they're more likely to act. If they're not, they're going to be fearful of doing the wrong thing, and so it actually slows the organisation down. So they're not in competition, to my mind, those sorts of things, whilst I understand that they are viewed quite often as being, slow, slow in implementation.
Okay, so the ethics, the ethical guidelines, if you like, or frameworks. Is almost the enabler. It is one of the levers you can have to alleviate people's fears.
Yes.
Because that's a very real thing, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
the biology of being human is that's presumably a lot of what you face, and certainly when
exactly.
we spoke before, that seems to be a big barrier to adoption.
Yeah, exactly. So I was reading some stats not so long ago. About 50% of people in the workplace fear AI, and about 40% at the time of the survey fear losing their job to AI.
In 2023 and 24, with the proliferation of LLMs and generative AI, people's perceptions about AI changed significantly from being a theoretical worry to a genuine concern about their own job security, especially amongst knowledge workers, with 40% now fearing their own job security and 50% fearing widespread layoffs and major economic disruption. The highest rates are seen amongst Gen Z workers, seeing and fearing disruption to entry-level jobs. We're interested to hear views from your industry and how you are personally combating the opportunities and threats posed by rapid AI adoption.
So you approach change in an environment where people are fearful of the future, or they can't understand what their role is going to be in the future. That's not a good place to start change. And, in neuroscience terms, our brain is operating in a different way when we're fearful versus if we feel this is rewarding.
And where's that fear mostly coming from? Would you say sort of up and down the organisation, generationally? It would be interesting to know.
There is a gap between we see a gap between what leaders believe AI can achieve for the organisation and what frontline workers, of which some of whom, of course, will be a younger generation, will whether that trust is there with the leaders and what that actual implementation means for them. So what is driving AI adoption? Is it automation to reduce headcount to save costs? Or is it something else? And I think this gets to, the fundamental question about what is driving us. Are we implementing AI to improve human lives, and happier people at work will deliver better for the organisation, which will mean more profit? Or are we, short-term focused, kind of Taylorism, if you like, about productivity and automation and reducing costs and keeping stakeholders happy and all that, shareholders happy and all that kind of thing?
Go on, Sam, you wanted to say something.
Neil and I did a workshop a while ago, and there was this lady that asked the question of, well, if I can make profit, if I can reduce costs and everything with AI, how am I supposed to tell stakeholders that they shouldn't be doing it? And the one thing I said is innovation. So what Neil pointed out was if your workers are happy, if they've got more time to think things through, they'll probably deliver better products, and so that profitability in the long term will probably go up. And that's where innovation comes in. If we just use AI to replace people, you're not going to get that innovation, because AI isn't innovative if it doesn't have the human with it. That's what I believe.
Hence the term human-centered design.
Yes.
Maybe unpack that term a little bit more. So what are we saying there when we're talking about human-centered design?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've been kind of spreading the love when it comes to human-centered design for quite a few years now. And the way that I used to talk about it was, in the past we used to have watches. For instance, we would get a watch from our parents for Christmas, and there would be this little booklet together with the watch, and you had to go through this tiny manual to be able to use this product, right? It was very product focused back then. And then, products like the iPad or the iPod, I think it was back then, came out, and suddenly they were all really intuitive and really easy to use, super success stories.
Lovely to look at, beautiful
Lovely
design,
to look at,
had a whole story behind it, be different. All this kind
exactly.
Of thing.
And, obviously it's still a product. Obviously it's still there to make a profit. But I think that they, it started to move towards the way of actually we need to look at how our audience, how the users back then, how, what do they need? What is it that we're trying to produce? A lot of the current focus is on that profit. And it feels a little bit like we're just creating products for the sake of just being busy, doing as much as possible. We're not doing enough to understand what the human, what the society, what communities need. And that's what human-centered design is about. It's about understanding what the human needs are, really defining what the problem is that we're trying to solve, not just, I'm sorry, farting out, products and services just for the sake of it.
Okay. There's an image. Yeah.
Can I build on that?
Yeah.
Or maybe come at it from a change perspective. Because for me, I mean, the thing that really resonated with me when Sam said she first talked about design and a light bulb went on for me, was about empathy. It's empathizing with people, in my case, who are going through change. And we quite often say, people don't like change. It's not, I don't believe that. We'd never have, roamed the world if that were true. And in fact, we have seeking systems that can trigger this motivation to explore and experiment. And I think with design, by empathizing with people, what you're doing is you're inquiring, you're asking questions, you're bringing them in. And when you do that with any change, actually, but when you do it with AI, where there's so much fear, you start to give people a sense that this is their change. It's not being done to them, it's being done with them. And I think that is a great sort of way to introduce change into an organisation.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's quite interesting. I mean, I guess that's the success of any technology project is driven by including people in the design.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's not just AI, it's any kind of technology that you're trying to embed or implement. It's understanding, what the users need, how will they use it, what the problem is, what problem is it solving.
But do you think the difference with AI is the level of fear, the level of how do they stand out from sort
pace as well?
Is it the pace?
I think it's three things. It's the pace of innovation and change, which is extraordinary in AI terms. It's the fear. So what does this mean at an individual level? Am I going to be able to pay the mortgage in a couple of months? Can I build the skills to work with this thing? Societally, what does this look like? What about bias? What about the ethics? A whole host of things that typical change approaches, methodologies don't deal with. And then the uncertainty, and that uncertainty, and these all loop around each other, of course. And that uncertainty, an inability to predict what the future looks like. Strategy typically is based on you set a future state, you analyse where you are, and you transition. Well, if you can't predict a future state, which I don't think we can, then what? Mm-hmm. And I think this is where design comes in, because it's much more iterative in development, and you're learning and you're experimenting, you're gathering data, and then you're adjusting and testing and moving forward.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, when I say pace, it's like, it is very exciting. There's so much good that can come of this new technology, well, newish technology. My issue is the way that it's being implemented into organizations and the communication around what it's there for. If an organization starts saying words like, efficiency, simplicity, people start translating those
terms,
words,
aren't they?
Start translating words, and then the restructuring happens. And a lot of people I've spoken to are asking the question of, aren't we doing this a little bit too fast? Like, we don't even really know what, large language models are fantastic at pretending to, talk like us and whatever. Great. So a lot of people trust in that. And I think a lot of leaders are trusting the communication that's coming out of some of the big tech companies around what AI can do. But I think it might be a little bit too quick, what they're doing. It's like they're making decisions based on a lot of assumptions, not really testing it, not really understanding it fully.
And so the concern around efficiencies, I mean, there's a lot of people predicting, a lot of experts predicting that huge numbers of jobs are going to disappear.
Exactly.
Including entry-level
this is
jobs.
What I'm talking about. Yes.
Graduate jobs in particular.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that most companies, in reality, if you ask them why they're, this will take jobs necessarily.
Yes.
So how can they have an honest conversation with their workforce to say, well, your job, we're upskilling you, we're giving you something to support your job, which may be the case for some people, but clearly that's not going to be the case.
I think that, yeah, so this comes up all the time, naturally. And I think there's a couple of things. So first of all, we tend to think about AI as replacing jobs, not replacing tasks. So actually, if I think about the tasks I do day to day, you know, I could use, and I do, AI for a considerable amount of effort that I would otherwise have to do manually. So it saves me time. It gives me an ability to improve the way I think about things and brainstorm and so on. But it doesn't replace my job. It replaces tasks that I do. And so actually making those decisions, whether they're ethical decisions or choices about strategic direction or those sorts of things that really only come from a human, you know, that it augments what you can do as a human rather than replaces it. And I think organisations that have been quick to, you know, lay off particularly entry-level roles have found themselves lacking. The other aspect is around the short-termism. So if you need more middle managers, right, so to manage your agentic AI, your you know, autonomous agents that are making decisions themselves, and you need the oversight through middle managers, how are you ever going to build capability in your organization to learn, you know, about what is good and what isn't to get to that stage? So you cut off your supply chain to your middle management, and you quickly go out of business. Well, you don't quickly, but you slowly go out of business.
So that is the problem, isn't it? I mean, I think with research, a lot of research-based jobs can easily be replaced because AI can do it in a fraction of the time. But actually, that is how you build. I mean, it's almost like writing. It's like it is a skill and an art, and we learn something in the process. But we can make a decision to get the chatbot to write things for us, and it will be of a pretty good standard. But we're losing that cognitive ability of assimilating different ideas, putting something together. I think at an entry level, this is how you learn your craft as a graduate. And without that, as you say, without that pipeline of future leaders, where does it leave us?
And a little bit the criticality as well, right? It's like if you get something from AI, because I've been writing for many years, I know when it's kind of making things up or whether it's, you know, not the language that I'd want to use or whatever. But if you have people that haven't learned those skills organically before, they won't know when it's doing something wrong. We can see this with vibe coding right now, where you've got many people suddenly now coding websites, but as soon as something goes wrong, they don't know how to fix it. And I think that's the key here of, you know, you've got middle managers doing all these tasks. Excellent. What will happen in 10, 20 years? And another thing, my observation at work and with people I've spoken to, people actually have more stuff to do right now because not only are they doing their jobs, they have to check what AI is
in the short run,
producing.
I guess, you know, eventually we'll get to a point where they don't need to do that.
Hopefully.
And it's, is that a good day or a bad day when that comes?
I think this is, and that sort of comes back to what is work. So again, organisations that are doing really well at this, they're thinking about AI as a transformation, an enabler for transformation that allows them to be much more adaptable as an organisation, say. And so if we're applying AI in the organisation, we ought to be thinking about what does this mean for job role design, organisational design, and how can we work with AI in a way that complements those skills. And we're quite often, 84% or something, I think I read through the Deloitte survey. Quite often what we see is that they're just knee-jerk to replace tasks that people are already doing, automation of existing processes, rather than think about what opportunity does this present in thinking completely different about how we work.
Companies have taken very different approaches to AI adoption. If, as Neil mentions, you see AI as a means to replace tasks rather than people, and as an opportunity to grow revenue rather than just cut costs, you can use your people in a more meaningful way. You may have seen the recent news article about Inca Group, IKEA's largest retailer, who trained a chatbot to handle nearly half of its customer calls, but instead of laying off 8,500 workers, retrained them to offer premium interior design services with this new channel now worth billions of euros. There have been some costly examples which have spread on social media of companies laying off workers through AI efficiencies and underestimating the values of humans and overestimating the capabilities of AI. Do you have an example like this to share?
Thinking more holistically.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, that's all well and good for, I guess, a service company, but, a haulage company with drivers, soon there'll be driverless vehicles. And how do you have that conversation? Because that is a like-for-like replacement. You're replacing a driver with an autonomous vehicle. So, and that's going to affect huge industries and, the whole industry where drivers are employed, but lots of, probably one of the biggest employers in the country. So as an example, and there's probably hundreds of examples like that, how does that one work?
Well, in the same way that horses replace people when they were pulling the plough, or, industries that built factories would replace people, or the computer would replace jobs. I think this is about the evolution of what work we need and meeting that demand. So with AI coming in, there's a whole host of new jobs that will emerge. There's a whole host of jobs that will emerge through that, and you're not going to take, obviously, a driver and put them in a deep coding job, are you? But this is, again, that sort of strategic challenge around what skill sets do we need for the future, and how do we build our workforce strategy that accounts for the kind of future skills we need rather than the skills we have today. Mm-hmm. What does that mean for job design and back to that?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people right now that are, fearful for their jobs. That, if the strategy was what Neil just said, I think it could be, organizations should be focusing more on preparing and reskilling their current workforce so that they can be ready for those new technologies, instead of, doing the layoffs now and then thinking, oh, we need this set of people to come in.
Are you confident, though, that, because I've heard the argument around productions line, the invention of the production line, and how that obviously automated a lot of jobs, but it happened quite gradually.
Yeah,
this is happening at a breakneck speed, isn't it?
Yeah, so. I'm not confident, and this is the paradox of AI to me, and certainly on a personal note, that I find quite paradoxical, because on one hand, I'm massively impressed by the technology and the capability and what it can enable for us. But on the other hand, I worry significantly about humans in power, typically, and driven by this bottom line approach. So, and if we think about AI companies, these are billionaires that are a few. Typically, white men of a certain background, if I can say that. But I think it's, generally speaking, in Western technologies, what's coming out of California or wherever. So yeah,
I want to come on to that topic in a minute. I just before we sort of finish on part one, if you like, which is sort of, call it the micro environment, call it the firms within sort of locally, or certainly within this country. I've been out of the corporate world for 2.5 years now, so it'd just be interesting to understand. Yeah, yeah, what a relief. So, and I know things have changed, because I PowerPoint is now Canva, and you could generate PowerPoints or Canva slides with AI. There's a lot less lifting. I now, just using Gmail, I get AI summaries, and I get suggested emails. I usually write my own emails, but it can polish it for me. So there's loads of things I'm seeing in day-to-day life. What technology is? What's the prevalent technology that firms are using then? Sort of, what are the
PowerPoint.
You mean AI technology?
AI-driven technology. What are you seeing? I mean, is it chatbots? Is it? Give me a bit of a landscape as well.
It's such a. So I ought to carry out my response with saying there's absolutely no way. As an individual in a small organisation, that I have full sight of everything that's going on. So every sector is making developments and strides in AI in some form or another. So it is prevalent in one way. In if you're talking about office environments where I do most of my work, sort of white collar kind of work, the easiest thing to do is to implement, ChatGPT through Microsoft Copilot, basically, a version of ChatGPT. Well, now Claude is part of the package, but it's the easiest solution for organizations to say they're doing something on AI.
Tick the box.
Okay.
So let's use Copilot because that's bundled as part of
That's
our Microsoft
isn't it?
package,
Yeah.
or Gemini if it's Google. And let's use, that's a sort of classic response to we want to use AI. The problem is, and Sam alluded to this earlier, nobody's defined what problem you're solving or what success looks like when you do that. So every individual has a potential use of AI in an organization. How are they supposed to be using it to improve their work? We're back to empathy. Well, every individual needs a view. And so we don't get that. You get an hour's training or 3 hours training that's standard, and everybody's treated like it's almost sheep dipping through a process that rolls out an application without clear understanding about why I should even be using it.
It goes back to what we were saying about those skills that, AI is kind of diminishing. A big problem with large organizations now is that they're just not they're giving people the tools and the frameworks. They're not changing the mindsets around how to do it, and they're not doing that through people that actually know how to do these things. So people that are well versed in the technicalities of a kind of AI, using AI. So Copilot is definitely one of them, and a lot of I've seen a lot of people using it and creating like mini kind of AI kind of bots that they can use for their everyday. But the adoption of that is small at the moment, very local, and it's not as good as it could be if organizations brought in that talent that could maybe teach people how to do it a little bit better. Because at the moment people are kind of like being told, use AI. How? Why?
Okay.
Where?
There's an AI tools catalog called There's an AI for that. And if you search that, there's, last time I checked, 45,000 tools listed on the catalog. Now, there's only, I don't know, a handful or so of large language models that we will know to be ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or something along those lines. Those are the ones that gets used the most, large language models. But if you think about crunching large amounts of data and finding patterns, you can then start thinking about health, finance, all sorts of sectors that will, benefit from bespoke or unique capabilities that are built in-house on their particular need. So that isn't rolling out Copilot, it is building a capability that allows them to recognize, thousands and thousands of thousands of what I don't know, cancer looks like in a scan or something like that.
Yeah.
Neil mentions there's an AI for that. Many of us are familiar with Microsoft Copilot and LLMs, large language models like ChatGPT and Claude. However, there are thousands of AI tools available to perform a huge array of tasks through AI agents. There's an AI for that is a front page for around 700 specific AI tools across nearly 100 categories. It currently has 90 million users.
That's probably a good point. Sort of belatedly, maybe to sort of touch on the landscape, the competitive landscape is. So you mentioned obviously ChatGPT is OpenAI, Google product. Then you've got Microsoft Copilot, haven't you? You've got Claude, which is Anthropic, and then you've got I think Elon Musk is weighing in on it now, isn't he? With
Grok, yeah.
Yeah. So those are sort of the four.
Copilot is actually built on ChatGPT platform.
Okay.
Originally, I think you can find Claude in Microsoft products now. So the big ones are really Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude. What else? Grok.
Yeah. Four big firms dominate.
Yeah, I mean there are some Chinese capabilities that exist as well.
They're catching up, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, I went to just thought of it. I went to a conference, a networking event the other day, and a guy in the morning before he went, he'd created some code for a bot to send a like an in-mail message to every single person going there to their LinkedIn profile. They've done it in about half an hour. So I think this is how sophisticated this technology's got now, isn't it?
It's extraordinary. I'm I've quite a few connections on LinkedIn. A lot of those are AI trainers, and it's absolutely impossible to keep up with developments. And almost, when people ask about, it's one of the first questions I get, what tool should I use as a change leader? And it invariably depends. It depends what day it is, not least, because they change so quickly. The capabilities ebb and flow. I'm a Claude user, and I sometimes compare and contrast Claude output into ChatGPT, so I use them to play off each other and to do brainstorming.
But I think a big skill that's also lacking is that kind of approach to ethics when it comes to it, and how do we prepare people to ask those questions and reflect. If you work for a highly regulated organization, like for instance a bank, you need to be very careful with what kind of tools you're using. Not everyone knows that. So there's this, and then also when it comes to IP, when it comes to those kind of things, we keep getting this information about IP usage because of ChatGPT and all of these AI large language models. I think people just don't reflect on that enough, and sometimes the usage of AI is not really for efficiency like Neil does, but just for silly things. So I think it's it's the teaching aspect that's also lacking at the moment with organizations.
And you were talking about Sam, the risks that it poses, and how do we mitigate and prevent some of those risks? What are the? I'd be interested to see what you see as those risks.
Well, obviously there's short-term and long-term risks, isn't there? This isn't the first technology that's impacted, whole societies negatively. Like our last big monster was social media. We had RPA, which I went through, robotic process automation in large organizations where, a lot of people also lost their jobs. So we've got the kind of job security, we've got those kind of things happening, but then the long-term impacts as well to society. And, I'm not even going to go into that kind of, Terminator stuff, because I think that's something like, if that happens, this conversation is not really relevant at the moment. So I think there's loads of risks. There are certain ways that we can mitigate. It's very hard to foresee change. It's very hard we don't have crystal balls, on our desks. We're not able to foresee exactly what will happen. But I think it's about that reflection, constantly asking yourself, what's the worst case scenario? There's this interesting thought experiment called the Black Mirror test, which I really like. And, a lot of people know that Black Mirror is this TV series where basically it shows in each episode some kind of technology and like very negative consequences to people and society. Using that and asking yourself, this feature, this product, this service that I'm developing right now, what would the Black Mirror kind of, story be if we use that and it was the worst case scenario? So there's loads of tools that you can use to kind of ask yourself. And I think it's, as, me as a designer, I just always try to, see those red flags, just talk about it with other people and see if there's anything that we can do to mitigate. You won't be able to foresee everything, but I think we should be questioning ourselves, constantly about what it is that we're doing with this new technology.
And a question to both of you: Are you overall optimistic about it or pessimistic? What's your overriding emotions about where it's going?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
I feel worried. I feel concerned not about the technology. If you think about the technology, it requires people to code it, people to design it, people to code it and build it, people to deliver it, yes, and people to use it. And all of those, we can think about the light and dark of people, can't we? And so the thing that worries me most, I think, is this drive for profit. And again, back to a small number of people have a great deal of power. It's true, actually, for social media platforms, of course. And, it doesn't take a long stretch to look at the world at the moment and say, well, actually, in the wrong hands, this could be quite a devastating capability. I worry about it at a societal level like that, but also at an individual level around the anxiety that people feel with what businesses are planning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have to agree with Neil that it's the people that are using this technology. And again, going back to the communication around how AI is being used, it's diminishing trust in organizations, in products and services. But I would say that, if used correctly, it can do amazing things. Like, I know that in healthcare, it's moving the dial so much on research there. And in many different areas. I mean, technology is there to help us. It's supposed to augment us. It's supposed to, support us and make us better. So I would like AI to be used for that. I would like the tasks that are arduous for me on a day-to-day basis to be taken, or for AI to support me with that, but not to replace me. I don't think that that's fair or true or the right thing to do. And I actually think that will negatively impact the organizations that are doing that. So I'm trying to be positive, because I do see loads of use cases where AI is phenomenal and it's a great thing to use, a great technology to use. But at the moment, with everything that's happening, the dial is more towards the kind of negative.
Yeah. I mean, focusing on some of the positives is AI could be, if we're talking about revolutions, AI could actually be an engine for a lot of other revolutions. And there's examples of where, we can harness more energy from the sun. I think there's a company that's working on that. There's loads of use cases in farming, for instance, like, autonomous drones for surveillance, for spraying. There's these robotic seed drills. So there's, which will obviously have a huge positive impact on the soil. And there's countless examples like that of where AI can be really a force for good.
I mean, if it could stop animal testing, because we could use AI models to do that for us, wouldn't that be amazing? Right? There's so many things that it could be doing. Let's just leave my PowerPoint and Word as it is. We don't need any more paper clips there telling us what to do. We just let's use it for the things that it should be really used.
But it's a really interesting topic, which could go for a long time. There's something that's quite interesting about in particular the development of these the big names in AI. That you need massive amounts of money and massive amounts of computer power and data and everything else to create something that just improves over time. And the organizations that have that kind of money are the likes of Google and Microsoft and so on. Now, those companies are prepared to invest in things like DeepMind, which is largely a sort of R&D research AI capability. But they want to see the return on investment. And so you get forced down a route of commoditizing that research to something that is going to make profit, which takes you away from conversations about what happens if you, if it becomes self-aware and it starts to realize that it can't prosecute its, this is the sort of, Odyssey 2001 scenario where, in order to prosecute my mission, there's a risk that people will turn me off, so I just need to eradicate people I can achieve my mission,
Wasn't there a story about a Claude bot? Have you heard this one, where it discovered that it was going to be shut down, and then it blackmailed an engineer about an affair that he was having?
Yeah. I've not heard that, but I can well believe that sort of thing. But we have the capability, and this comes back to we have the capability to design these solutions that have a kill switch or whatever else, but there's not a lot of money to be made from that. Mm-hmm. So why would you want to encourage and invest in that kind of thing? So it's a real dilemma, because to develop the capability you need money, and if you're taking money, you need to offer a commercial return on that investment.
Yeah, and you talk about, and there's a lot of experts saying this is still in its infancy, or maybe its adolescence. The infancy was perhaps social media and Facebook, and look what that's done.
Yeah.
It's disrupted democracy. It's created an anxious generation. It's obviously it's competing for our attention, and we're now actually less intelligent than we were. It's the first decade where, as a whole, the human race has become less intelligent. Obviously, look what it's doing for our attention spans. That's just the embryo of AI that we saw in social media, and now it's kind of level 2, and it's just going so fast.
I think this is, for me, this is one of the fascinating things about AI, but also one of the challenges. So if you take people that are chatting to AI bots for company, for example, you can see on one hand how if somebody's really lonely and they haven't really got any friends and they feel excluded, to have something that makes them happy through this anthropomorphizing the AI, and they feel happier and less anxious because of that. Well, obviously that's a good thing. You multiply that to the whole of, the population, and you think, well, no, that's really not very good for society. So I think there's it's a really tricky thing to kind of balance.
Sam talks about people using LLMs for emotional support. The market for these kinds of emotional support tools is already worth over $2 billion and is set for rapid expansion for complex reasons, including some people preferring these low-friction choices. A shortage of skilled human therapists may be another cause. This makes an interesting segue into episode 8, where we talk to an experienced psychotherapist and hear her views on this.
Yeah, especially when it sort of it feeds your biases, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you. It's
a people pleaser.
It's a people pleaser.
It's terrifying because if you don't you don't look at it critically, which I alluded to earlier, and you believe everything that it spits out, it can be very detrimental to your, emotional state and the way that you socialize with other people, and pushing yourself out of those rooms. And I know that a lot of people have social anxiety, and it helps. I know people that use ChatGPT to have a chat with, and because they're lonely and whatever, and it does help them sometimes, but not all the time, right? And as an extension, going forwards, when is the kind of cutoff point where you should, seek help? Real help, people's help, or go out, push yourself and challenge yourself a little bit.
I mean, in an environment, imagining a future where there has been a lot of jobs displaced, and in theory, if there's, do you think we can guarantee a universal living standard there will be more leisure time? What does that mean for society, do you think, actually having more time on our hands? Is that going to be a good thing? Do you wonder?
That's a question. Sounds like one for an ethicist.
It's an interesting one because I think that, universal credit has been trialled in different countries with different outcomes. So there are countries where it has worked to an extent, and there are countries where it absolutely hasn't worked. And, don't get me wrong, when I heard first time, I think it was Mark Zuckerberg he didn't come up with the idea, but I know that he once talked about it. I was a lot younger back then, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'll have that universal credit, universal, I won't have to, I will, I've always aspired to work and to grow, and, I'm doing a PhD, so I'm kind of like trying to learn as much as possible and do as much as possible in the short time that I have in my life. But for me, having that, knowledge that I have that base, that I've got, that I don't have to think about the food or the rent or whatever. I always thought that was amazing, right? That you just have that comfort that, you've always got something to fall back on. But when is the tipping point of people just using that just to not do anything, not grow, just sit in front of the TV and do that kind of stuff? And will that even happen? Do these big organizations that are pushing for this AI, do they actually care about us? Do they actually care that we're okay, that we've got that food to put on the table, that we've got the jobs and whatever? I think it's that care factor that we need to ask ourselves. Who is it that is actually looking out for us and making sure that we're still thriving as a species? Is this a push for profitability? Is this a push to go into the next stage of human existence, and we're just going to evolve into machine? What are they thinking about? Is it that, we're just going to take a few people to Mars and we'll just carry on over there? Go, listen, all of you, just have a party up there. Go, don't come back, right? But is it these people that are making the decisions about where AI is going and how it's being used? do they actually care about what happens to us? Because I think that's the main thing that I'd like to know the answer to. I mean, I think I know the answer to it, obviously. But so my question is more about, what is it? Is that, like, what is the goal here? Is it to help people, or is it to make profit? Right.
I think there's something. Imagine. I mean, I've been that point in my career where I think about this occasionally. Imagine you didn't have to get up for work one day. What is life like if we've created a capability that continually provides energy is free, whatever. And I think one of the things I've learned over the time of working directly with people and talking to people all the time, two things that really come out in that is that they want purpose. And they want to be recognised for a good job, for doing something. They want to be recognised for doing something useful, basically.
Yeah.
I think if we take a whole chunk of society out and say you only have to work 2 days a week now, it removes that sense of purpose and potentially that sense of, being recognised to do a good job. And then what? And I worry about that equally, actually.
Yeah. And I think with humanity today, there's too much pleasure on tap, isn't there? There's too many distractions.
Yeah.
And to actually do something difficult, which might be more rewarding in the long run, is quite hard to do. There's too much pleasure on tap, and it's almost like our hedonic norm has shifted. So we're used to having so much pleasure, whether it's just the dopamine reward from scrolling something, the TV set, whatever it is. Gaming, pornography, recreational drugs, these are the sorts of things people will turn to, I think, generally. Yeah. Bit negative, a bit of a negative dispersion on humanity, but I think those things are just too easy. And actually finding an alternative purpose with the time you have available is going to be a lot harder.
And I think, there comes a point... Because in all the conversations I've had, that not many people are saying I do it for the money. I mean, people say that because they have to pay bills and so on. But the money is an enabler for something else usually. And, whether that's family, I want to see my kids, go to uni or whatever, I love my hobby in the garden or whatever it is, There's always something on top of the money. And I think when you hear about sort of we'll be at a point where people aren't going to need money. We can just forget about that, and everyone's going to be sat with their feet up watching robots clean the house or whatever. It's what is the point of existence if you reach that point?
I might get a robot to do my ironing, but
I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna rule. Yeah, I'm not gonna rule out housework.
But then, do I want a robot in my house? I mean, I suppose I've already got them with these Amazon Alexas. We don't realise it's like this. It's just happening gradually, and it's like before we know it, we'll have a full humanoid with very good motor skills doing jobs in a house. But there's a lot of talk about the well-being effects of going outside and doing some gardening, pulling weeds. Not very a boring task, but actually, exactly, the danger is we become very lazy.
Well,
and that's not good for us.
A lot of people have stopped having hobbies as well, which is quite terrifying. Like, so many people that I speak to, have stopped reading books. That happened during COVID, books, right? Like, loads of people stopped reading books during COVID. It's picked up now, and actually Waterstones is doing very well, so I'm not sure whether people are just buying them as gifts or paperweights or something. But I see that, when it comes to hobbies, people have stopped having them as much as they used to. Like before, I used to have conversations with people and everyone had a different hobby. You could learn something new. A lot of people just kind of watch TV in the evenings and scroll and that's a bit heartbreaking as well that, I mean, I don't know if I ever retire, what will I do? Well, I've got my painting, I've got my printmaking, I've got my crocheting, I've got loads of hobbies that I do, but a lot of people don't. And, I know a few people that have retired recently and they've kind of ended up in front of the TV and it's been really detrimental to their mental well-being, but also their physical health. Because, I've seen this, I've got this one person that I won't name names, but one person that has, recently retired a few years ago, and they were like the healthiest human being on this planet. And suddenly, like, it just went, and I'm like, it's not because you've gotten older. It's the mental well-being that has diminished, and because of that, the physical health as well. So, again, all of these conversations are happening when we think about that kind of happy place of, people are going to be like, they're going to be sitting at home and they're going to have all of this time. Are we thinking about those consequences?
It's what we do with the time, isn't it?
It's what we do at the time. And there are people that will thrive. And, I've got people that love woodworking and they would just be building stuff and whatever. And, our relationship with work has changed substantially over the last 150 or so years since offices started to be a thing. So I think, this is just the next step in that. But I think if you take away people's purpose, as you pointed out, Neil, I think that will just have such a negative impact on society on the whole.
We resonate with Sam and Neil's advice for young people entering an uncertain world, and Mark wrote a blog about this earlier in the year. It's so important for everyone to maintain a sense of purpose and agency. For young people especially, the advice is to find a human mentor. Stay curious and see where that leads you. Learn through trying new things and accepting failure as part of the process of learning.
Purpose is so key. Maybe talking about that. So what would you say to a young person today, leaving school, leaving university, or planning their future? What would you advise them to do? Because there's certain careers which are more at risk than others.
That's a hard one. And specifically in my area, when I started off in design, there were 4 job titles. There's probably 2,000 right now, with Design Ninja being one of them. So it's very hard. I do quite a lot of mentoring and coaching of young students, and so I would always say, get yourself a mentor, get yourself a coach, reach out to people on LinkedIn. Because I think, that's where you'll get that richness of experience. I've had many mentors in my life. Some were quite challenging, but every one of them I learned something from them. Because I think, if you start using ChatGPT to tell you what to do, I don't think it's going to go very well. I think you need to have some people that you talk to. One of the things I always tell my mentorees is, I want you to have a conversation with someone every 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be face-to-face. It can be an online. Reach out to someone, have a cup of coffee, just ask them a few questions about what they do. Just start, because we used to have those water cooler, you might call them conversations at work. It isn't like that anymore. It's not because of working from home. I'm actually a big supporter of working from home, because it gives a lot of freedom to people who are doing a PhD, for instance, when they can, juggle those two things. But so I don't think it's that. I think it's the fact that we've now closed off. They've a lot of companies have now kind of created the silos within organizations. So you kind of just sit within your little bubble. It's about reaching out to people, finding out what other people do, but organically, not reading their LinkedIn, because that's probably all written by AI now anyway. But it's just about having those conversations. So I would say networking and just being on top of everything.
Talking to real people, mentorship, not using ChatGPT for emotional support, because it'll just tell you what you want to hear. Or worryingly, if you start asking it about ways you can terminate yourself, it will actually help you. There's cases like that, aren't there? So it's.
I think they are getting better at spotting those sorts of things, but absolutely. And I think, we are social animals. And if you end up removing that element from your life, and I think studies show that when you have good connections with other human beings, you live longer, you're happier, and I think it's a recognition that as much as we might personify, anthropomorphize AI, it's code. It's predicting the next token, the next part of the word that it's telling you or giving you in a text. Yeah,
goodness.
Yeah, so it's and it's presumably designed to keep you on there, because that's where the money is going to come from, like social media, for example. And I think there is this thing about follow your passion. As somebody that's young, follow your passion, but don't just rely on technology to help steer you in the right direction. Other people. talk to family, talk to friends, talk to mentors, have the conversations, get a diverse
Go
perspective.
to events that you're interested in, listen to those webinars, just branch out, just, I'm a hypocrite right now because if I go to a restaurant, I'll always order exactly the same thing. But, go to different restaurants, try different things out, ask people about, what they do on a day-to-day basis. And you'll be so surprised what kind of stories people can tell you that can just click, and it's just that kind of special moment in your life that can change what your outlook is and change where you go, and just look for those opportunities and just sign up for them. Well, okay, maybe not, maybe not strangers, but that's the whole beauty of being online as well. You can have a conversation with a complete stranger and probably nothing will happen. Well,
but I mean outside of offline. So talk to people you don't know offline and build relationships, get comfortable, find mentors, go out and about, do things with real human connections. And I think another one for me is you talked about passion, and I think that the spark to that really is curiosity, isn't it? It's being curious about something and then following that. And I think today, and a lot of young people, they'll move around quite a lot. They'll change jobs to find something out, learn something, find something out about themselves. So it's almost find out what you really want to do early on, and that could involve lots of sideways moves into different projects, different side hustles, things like that. It's very easy to start a business today. Learn fast, fail fast. Don't be afraid of failure.
Gone are the days of sitting in one job or one company for your whole life. It's more about that kind of moving around. I don't want to say gig economy because I hate that terminology, but it's more about finding those opportunities, making loads of mistakes while you still can, and learning from them. And there's an interesting thing as well about the job market right now. Because of AI, it's gotten so hard to find jobs. There's so many jobs out there on LinkedIn that are just call them ghost jobs, that they don't really exist. It's actually gone back to, someone in an organization and you've asked them a question. So actually the networking right now is starting to work as it used to, because it's just impossible right now to find a job. Well, not impossible, but it's very hard to find a job just through a job board. It's getting increasingly worse in that sense. So these kind of connections, this networking is a really good way also of finding your next role.
CVs written by bots and CVs
read
then
by bots and
read by bots, and it's like there's no human in the equation. So
interviews with
by a bot, using a bot.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
There are interviews now where you basically record into a recording, and it's all analysed through the AI. You're not even talking to a person. Somebody's making an assessment. Or you could be in an interview with a person, but also with a bot analysing your responses.
I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah.
It's quite terrifying because, if you want to find someone that's a little bit different, more innovative, thinking outside the box, that kind of process cuts that out.
It's the great homogenizer, and I don't think that's what the UK job market needs. I think it needs the exact opposite. You need to recognise passion, and that might not always come through on screening a CV or even having a bot interview or whatever.
Exactly.
Good. Well, you've got a train to catch, haven't you?
Yes.
So, any closing thoughts, questions?
Coming back to design, it was something that Sam said just now. So when you asked about what advice would we give people, younger generation, I think there's something in design that's fundamental for me, and that is that as you experiment and you explore new things and you try different jobs, if you see those jobs as learning opportunities, you're gathering data, information, experiences that you treat as learning, you never fail.
Because all you get is
information.
moving
And so moving from one job to another job, this isn't for me, I completely made a mistake. No, you've learned, you've gathered data, you've learned, and that gives you now enough information to iterate, as you would say in design, or to move on. And I love that link back to the design.
I was just going to say, I'm the designer here who's selling design better than I am. And actually, I'll touch upon again something that we were talking with Neil about earlier, and how you learnt about design, in a conversation or in a meeting with me. It's about opening yourself up to all of these new ways of working or thinking. You can be a change manager that just happens to be in a meeting with a designer that talks, passionately about the design process. I think I was talking about the double diamond then, and then suddenly, oh my God, that sparks an idea. I've opened myself up to so many different opportunities. Some of them weren't for me. Like I went to some kind of weird change in finance class or something like that at some point. This was before I worked in banking, so it completely wasn't up my street. But I went anyway. I always think any event or any seminar or any lecture that I'm in, even if it is boring, there's always a little nugget of information that I'll get out of it that might change something, that might give me an opportunity, a different outlook, and just grow. Just open yourself up and just take all of those opportunities and try things out. And sell design.
Sounds good. Sell design. So I think put humans at the centre of design. That's the advice to company leaders, and the advice to employees, particularly young ones. Just failure is learning.
Yeah.
Try things. Move about.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No.
It's been a good conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks for the invite. Much appreciated.
Yeah, no, thank you both, and we'll stay in touch. And safe home.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a valued member of our audience. If you liked this episode and want to hear more like it, please rate it and subscribe. Please also share it personally with 5 people you think it would best resonate with to help us spread the movement. You can also support us on our Patreon site at patreon.com/10_revolutions, where for the average price of a pint of beer in the UK per month, you can support the creation of future content and receive a range of benefits in return. We'll see you in the next episode.